They say fact is stranger than fiction, and yesterday is absolutely no exception to that rule. We had a crazy day in the markets. That was Wednesday, April 9th. We had a crazy day in the market. Bitcoin opened up pretty low, around 76,000. And then in a matter of moments, it jumped like 10%. We're going to get into why that happened. But this is one small piece of the bigger picture we're going to talk about, and why, if you're an XRP holder or a Bitcoin holder, you're going to want to pay attention. I have a different spin on this and what's happening globally behind the scenes that's not being talked about right now, and why this can completely revolutionize the entire planet's monetary system. And I do believe that we're on our way towards that. So look, if you're not a subscriber, now's the time to hit the subscribe button. We do new shows every single day. And if you found any value in this whatsoever, please do me one single solitary favor and hit the like button. I would greatly appreciate it. And with that, let's get into the markets yesterday. And I'm going to talk about something that, you've seen a lot about. But look, XRP, Bitcoin, we started the day in Bitcoin around 74,000. We started the day in XRP around 170, 174, $1.74. So pretty suppressed from their all-time highs. Bitcoin was at 109 to 76. That's like a 30% drop. You had XRP at 334, 335-ish, all the way down to 175. So almost a 40, 50% drop. My public math is not always the best. But here's the bigger picture. Is yesterday in the morning, we got this little tweet here from Donald J. Trump. This is a great time to buy. He actually told you what he was about to do, pump the markets. You have the Trump dump and then pump. And so what did he do? He right after this was put out, a little shortly after, he reduced, obviously, you've probably heard this on a million different networks. He reduced he pushed off the tariffs for 90 days. This was a leak that came out on Tuesday that the White House came out and said, well, that's false. We're not doing that. And then the very next day they do that. Well, I understand why they did that. They weren't ready. They had 75 plus nations coming to the table trying to negotiate better trade deals. The main holdout being China. We count for about 15 to 18% of their exports. They count for about 8%, 7 to 8% of our exports. So there's a big imbalance in trade there. And not only that, China doesn't play fair according to a lot of people who do business there. I heard from Mr. Wonderful himself on a podcast he did, or he was on CNN or something like that. He talked about how they were unfair, unjust, they steal IP, bad trade deals and all these things. They're hard to do business with. That's the government, they said. But regardless, that's all secondhand stuff, thirdhand stuff. The reality is that, we're trying to get them to play ball. Whether they will play ball or not will yet to be seen. But I think they have a lot to lose if they don't. So we'll see what happens there. But more importantly, the underground picture of what's going on and that's not being talked about is you have to bring back in the story of this. Now, that's gold. There's a little dollar behind there. And if you know the history of gold, it goes back a very, very long time. And since 1900s, the Gold Standard Act was introduced. In 1944, the United States became the world's reserve currency. And then, you had this Bretton Woods that made the currency actually, or made gold the actual standard dollar backed by gold. But I don't know if a lot of people know that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he actually made it illegal. He's a Democrat from 1930s, made it illegal for U.S. citizens to own gold. And that stayed in place till 1975. So it was illegal for you to buy gold in this country. Of course, that was controlling because they didn't want gold to compete with actual dollars as currency. They didn't want you to barter gold, because they wanted, doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. The Democrats are a little bit different in policy, obviously. And the policy is they didn't want something to compete with their power of currency, which was gold. Now think about in the recent times, what else has happened? Well, the Democrats also did this, back in Obama time when Bitcoin was released. They saw it as a threat, not initially, but eventually they saw it as a threat to the dollar's dominance and power. And so they banned it, right? Well, or they tried to ban it. They had choke point 2.0, and under Biden, they tried to get rid of it, just like Franklin Delano Roosevelt did way back when. But then what also happened in 1971, Nixon got us off the gold standard. He took us silently overnight, took us off the gold standard. It was the Nixon shock, I think they called it. Could be wrong. Let me look that up real quick. I have it notes somewhere on here. At 1933, under the Gold Reserve Act, FDR did ban private gold ownership, but Nixon ends the gold standard in 1971. Well, think about that. He ended the gold standard in 1971. We had a lot of inflation. It was, gold is traditionally thought of as a hedge against inflation, a hedge against, other depreciating items, because gold typically appreciates. It's gotten more valuable over time. And so this, we have a huge reserve at Fort Knox. Allegedly, no one's seen it in many, many years. We'll find out. They said they had 8,000 metric tons of gold in reserves. Now, I've heard China has 20,000 metric tons hiding somewhere that they lie about how much they actually have. Wow, that was how much they actually have, because for many reasons, it's a strategic reserve for them. They could dump it into the economies. China's known for manipulation of currencies. I mean, you look at yesterday, the T-bill popped up to 5% because China was just dumping, billions of dollars worth of T-bills, treasuries, just to show the U.S. what we could do, what they could do to our economy potentially, which is a danger in why we need to get, better trade deals with them. But look, here's the deal. Is it possible, and this is the little switch that I was talking about, is it possible that in the background right now, all of this, Trump's been real big on Bitcoin. He's been real big on setting up architecture for stable coins and having those back treasuries and be able to move money and currency easier into treasuries from the outside world through blockchain, all these things. Is it possible that we're going towards more, not of a Bitcoin standard, but he's setting up Bitcoin, a digital asset that we know exactly how much exists. We don't know how much gold exists. We can say we did these measurements and it might produce this much gold in the world. But remember, gold has the potential now with technology to be faked almost. Yeah, I know there's ways to figure that out, but as technology gets better, it might be able to be faked. Who knows? We also don't know how much gold is actually out there. So how can you give value to something where you have no idea what the future value or the future supply is going to be? So that makes it, not the best. Maybe we need to modernize. So this is what I'm thinking is going on in the background, that Trump's making Bitcoin the new gold. And with that standard and technology, it's harder to cheat when you can actually see all the money moving around on blockchain, where you know how much exists and who has it. It makes sense moving forward in a modern civilization to have something like this, as a digital asset as a reserve currency, or also as a strategic reserve, or just as a store of value for the country, which is a strategic reserve. But this new Bitcoin standard, could it replace the gold? And we've talked about this before, but this would completely derail China. And if the United States gets ahead of it, it could really put us in a long-term position to really be, again, the undisputed global leader in finance, in monetary policy, economics, trade, all these things. It would set us up as the hub. So this, I believe, if this is true, this would completely spike the price of Bitcoin, because every single country on the planet would have to get it and rush to buy it, drive prices up. Now, you have to also think about Bitcoin is expensive to move around, right? You don't want to, it takes a while and it's expensive. So that's where XRP comes into play as a means to move cross-border payments, provide liquidity in transactions and things like that. And with their recent purchase of is it Hidden Road? Hidden Road, that does already have a lot of, 300 institutional relationships that does already move trillions of dollars around. They're starting to set themselves up as that mover of money, and they're doing so very aggressively, more so than any other crypto that I've seen, to set up these partnerships, to meet with world leaders and things like that. So this is, in my opinion, why I am a Bitcoin holder and I am an XRP holder, and those are probably my two biggest holdings, because basically if you look at crypto, you have Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Tether, basically, those are the big ones. The big boys will be around. Are they too big to fail? I don't know. We'll see Ethereum, but they are big enough where I think they're around for a while. Your returns might start to normalize in the asset world, but man, it's just set up perfectly for all of these things. And if this happens, you're going to see Bitcoin's price spike even harder. My target for the end of the year was 120, 150. I still think that's in range, unless what I'm talking about is true, and then we're going to see a whole nother target and a whole nother new world order of finance and of monetary policy and of architecture of all these things. So that's what I'm seeing right now. This is a hopeful scenario. There's no fact that I know this is going on, but it would just be the perfect scenario. And so look, right now you have Bitcoin trading at 81.40 or 81.8. Yesterday, look at this. Look at this candle. This single candle was, that was a 6% candle. But if you looked at where it was on the day, I mean, geez, we had down here all the way up to here. You're talking about a 12% jump in a day. Now that's pretty significant on minor, when I say, short-term news of tariff pause. Imagine how that would jump if something like, that they're going to the Bitcoin standard or a digital asset standard of sorts to back currencies. That would be huge. Now, just the fact they're doing a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and if they start buying, every nation on the planet's going to start buying. It would pop this. This would look like a joke compared to what's coming. Same with XRP if it's announced as a payment system. We did have a candle that was like, oh, that's 13%, and that's just in an hour. I think these are hour candles. 13% in an hour it jumped. That was right after the news. I hope you all listened to Trump and his tweet. It's a little different than Eric's tweet about buying Ethereum that's now down 30%. But the Trump tweet, I mean, Trump is president, Eric's his son. So, it is what it is. All right, cool. Look, the other thing I was going to show you is this. Crude prices still down $60 a barrel, far shy from that $55 we got to yesterday. Bitcoin dominance still going up 62.6. It's still like going back over 4 years that we haven't seen dominance like this, which means, is that the end of altcoins, or does just that mean the altcoins are going to pump that much harder? And finally, liquidity. Yesterday, this was pushed into the favor of a Fed rate drop in May. Does not look like that anymore. The markets, honestly, the Fed, their job is to quell inflation, to pull down inflation, not to make your stunks pop, your stocks pump. That's not the goal of the Fed. If it was, inflation would be so rampant, it'd be unbelievable. June, that's when they want you to think about a rate cut. Look at this, July, more, September. As we go through the year, they're still pricing in about, I would say, at least 75 to 100 basis point cut by the end of the year. 75 to 100 basis points. That is a lot better than where we are now. Liquidity, yeah, there's the M2 money supply. I keep showing the same map, but the M2 money supply, if you look at the last year, boom, we've gone nothing but up. There is a ton of money on the sidelines, a ton of money. I mean, Warren Buffett himself has $300 billion of cash sitting there. He probably bought the last couple of days. I wouldn't be surprised to see that he bought something. He smells blood in the streets. When there's blood in the streets, you buy, even if it's your own blood. That's how millionaires and billionaires are made. They buy low and they sell high. They don't buy high and hope it pumps further. And you don't buy, when you buy low, there's no one else buying. And that's the beauty of buying low, is you get a better, you're going to get a better price if you're buying low. But if no one else is buying and everyone else is selling, it's not a bad time to be a buyer. Now, that being said, that is not financial advice, certainly not your financial advisor. I hope you got some value out of this rant today. If you did, be so kind, hit a like down below. And with that, I will see you next time.